I yield to the gentleman from Utah, Congressman Chaffetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it. And thank you, Chairman, for being here. A question, for those recipients of the TARP money, do you have the power and authority to replace the board or its president?
That's a good question. The Treasury with its ownership, you're welcome. The Treasury with its ownership obviously has some influence, but it has not used that influence to affect.
But it could.
I suppose it could, yes. The supervisors of the Federal Reserve can make changes or recommend changes in management if we believe that the management.
Let me move on. My time's short. I appreciate it. So, on this December 17th meeting, you're meeting in person. You have their chairman or the CEO Lewis, who is there expressing that he might invoke the MAC. And then in your written testimony today on page 2, it says, quote, "In responding to Bank of America in these discussions, I expressed concern that invoking the MAC would entail significant risks." Going down to your point you made on number 2, mid-sentence it said, because you had concerns and you expressed this back. It casts doubt in the minds of the financial market participants, including investors, creditors, and customers, about the due diligence and analysis done by the company, its capability to consummate significant acquisitions, its overall risk management processes, and judgment of its management. How is that not a threat? If you have the power and authority to release the board of directors and fire the CEO, and you're questioning their judgment, and you are saying, if you don't go through with this deal, how is that not a threat?
I never said anything about firing the board and the management.
But if you're questioning somebody's judgment, and you are in the supervisory role with the authority to let them go, how is that not a threat?
I was focusing particularly, and this was based on supervisory advice, on the reaction of the marketplace. What you have to understand is that during this period, the markets were extraordinarily fragile, and very quickly money could pull away from a bank and put it into serious trouble very quickly. That's what happened to Wachovia, for example. If the markets...
So you think that was a threat, your belief on what the threat would be from the market, but how could that not be a threat directly to Mr. Lewis and its board of directors? If you're questioning their judgment.
We advised him that we didn't think it was a good idea from the perspective of Bank of America for him to take that action. However, if he had taken it, it was his option to take it. And if he had taken it and there had been no adverse consequences, we would not have had much basis for responding to that.
With all due respect, I'm just not buying that. You're in charge. You have the ability to affect their outcome, to fire them, to let them go. You're telling them that if they don't come to the same conclusion as you do, that they would obviously, everybody in the room, everybody in the marketplace would know that their judgment was miscalculated. I think that's a threat, and I think it's reasonable for the CEO and the board of directors to take that as a threat. I don't see any other conclusion. If we were sitting across from the table, you controlled my destiny, that's one of the consequences.
Well, we don't control his destiny unconditionally. We would have to make a case that he had made decisions that were damaging to the company. And if he had made that decision and the company had prospered, there would be no basis whatsoever for any action.
All right, I'm going to move on. I want to go to page 4 of your testimony here. It says in this kind of mid-paragraph, this is from your testimony today, neither I nor any member of the Federal Reserve ever directed, instructed, or advised Bank of America to withhold from public disclosure any information related to Merrill Lynch. And yet, in an email of December 22nd, email number 18, we get this quote from Art Angelo. I believe Mr. Jordan referenced this earlier. Quote, "I'll ask Merrill Lynch's current estimate of fourth quarter losses versus market expectations and whether and when Merrill Lynch intends to file an 8K. If I get a sense that Merrill Lynch is leaning towards an early January filing, I'll try to steer him towards a later filing." That is so inconsistent with the comment that you made. Do you see that they're consistent, or is there an inconsistency here?
Well, I didn't see that email exchange until after I'd written my letter. But having looked now at the exchange, I note that if you look at the subsequent emails, that in fact Merrill Lynch had taken its disclosure decision and Mr. Angelo did not attempt to make them change it. So in the event, he did not make any attempt to affect the disclosure.
But the intent is still there, right?
He may not, but he did not take the action.
Do you feel in any way, shape, or form that you adversely affected or threatened Mr. Lewis or the Board of Directors?
I do not.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.